couldn't do that. I don't know how you do it, is usually the first phrase out of someone's mouth when I tell them what I do. I've only just graduated as a mental health nurse, but my placements throughout the 3 years have already been a pretty good indicator of what's to come. I know it's going to be rewarding and I know that I love my job, but the challenges and pressures that we as nurses face and that the NHS as a whole is facing are likely to just keep increasing. Working in any healthcare role, particularly in the current climate, is challenging. Between the financial years of 2009-2010 to 2020-2021, the budget for the Department of Health will have grown in real terms by about 1.2%. This is significantly less than the 4% per year increase in spending that is actually required according to the King's Fund. Thus, we as healthcare professionals are expected to continue to deliver the best care possible for our patients with less funding and less resources. The number of nurses actually working within mental health services has decreased by around 7,000 since 2010, and the number of mental health beds has fallen by 30% since 2009. However, this is an issue felt throughout the entire health service, not just within my line of work in mental health. There are currently almost 40,000 nursing vacancies within England alone, and the NMC, the Nursing and Midwifery Council, is consistently losing more members per year than it's gaining. But for me, the role of a mental health nurse comes with its own set of pressures, some of which do relate to that general pressure that's felt within the entire health service, but others are quite specific to the roles which we carry out. I personally see being a mental health nurse as a privilege. When I meet people, they're usually in crisis and quite often are in the worst possible place in their life. I get to work closely with them, and usually by the time my working relationship with them comes to an end, they're in a much better place. Things might not be perfect, don't get me wrong, but maybe now they can go back to work or start working on repairing their relationship with their partner. Or it could even be something as simple as just carrying out daily life activities that we take for granted without any support. Just, nipping to the shops to buy some food or preparing themselves a meal. Something that they previously weren't able to do because they were in crisis. No matter how small the improvement might seem to us as an outsider, for that person, it might mean everything. However, working with people when they are in such a difficult place leaves us as professionals quite vulnerable. If you were to ask me what the most important skill for a mental health nurse to have, I would immediately say listening. And I mean really listening. It's easy to listen to what someone says, but quite often our patients and our service users will tell us a lot more than the words they actually say. Despite being considered a soft skill by many, I would argue it is the one thing in my metaphorical tool belt that I couldn't do without, and I am guaranteed to need it on every single shift. If you're familiar with the American TV series House, you'll know that he quite often solves the medical mysteries that other people can't figure out, and he does that by noticing one small thing that other people have overlooked, but in actual fact it reveals the answer to everything. That's often how I see my role as a mental health nurse, particularly when working with so-called revolving door patients, people who are frequently in and out of services. For me, that means that we as services have missed something. People wouldn't be coming in and out of hospital with such frequency if we'd got it right. Sometimes it only takes noticing that missing piece of the puzzle that enables you to develop a better plan with someone that will enable them to really improve their lives. But in my role as a listener, I've heard some pretty harrowing things. Whilst it's my job to sit and listen to people who choose to disclose information to me, I am only human. It's a difficult balance because on one hand, I feel honoured that someone feels comfortable enough with me to be able to share what are quite often awful things. But on the other hand, I'm not a robot, and these issues can impact on my own mental health too. Whereas most people would discuss a bad day at work with their partner, friends, family, whoever it is, it's a lot more difficult when you're a mental health nurse. You can't exactly walk in through the front door and be like, hey honey, guess what happened at work today? Because that just feels really inappropriate when we're dealing with some of the emotive topics that we do on a daily basis. I have supported people that I've worked with through divorce, miscarriages, relationship breakdowns, deaths, every kind of abuse, and so much more. To be able to sit and listen to someone who abuses substances, for example, talk about the spiraling path that has led them to where they are today, or a child talk about the horrific abuse that they've endured, and to be able to walk away from that at the end of my shift and not break down into tears is a really difficult thing to do. It's also a terrifying thing to do because you're constantly worried that you're going to say the wrong thing or not be able to stop the horror from showing on my face and make an already really difficult situation even worse for the person talking to me. All people are individuals, and you never really know how someone's going to react when they've made themselves so emotionally vulnerable to you. And even though you might have supported someone in a pretty similar situation previously, that often doesn't make you any better equipped to handle the next situation, because every person is an individual and everyone deals with situations in their own way. The only thing harder than having to sit and listen to someone talk about these issues with me is desperately trying not to check your watch, and you really don't want to do it. It's not like you're trying to put a time constraint on someone, but the reality is we're desperately short on time. But I would never want someone who's speaking to me about something so emotionally difficult to feel like their conversation isn't worth my time, because it is. I became a mental health nurse to work with people, to help people, not to do paperwork. And I know it's a really important part of the job, but often it seems more like an overwhelming requirement than something that truly benefits the care my patients receive. There are care plans and risk assessments and so much more which needs to be done no matter how short-staffed you are. And if it isn't done, then you're going to start receiving those abrupt emails from team leaders and managers. And when you are that short on time, something's got to give. And the only thing that often can give is the time that you spend with people. And all the while the service is under such pressure, it's not going to get any easier. Nurses will continue to work under intense emotional pressure with very little time to process what they're hearing and doing. But with all that said, I still absolutely love my job, and I feel very lucky to be in a job that I love doing. And I mean, when people tell me they couldn't do it, I completely understand that, because it is not for everyone. But for me, I feel like nursing's in my bones. Like, I've gone into this straight out of school, and I genuinely couldn't imagine myself doing anything else for the rest of my working life. But it does really sadden me when I feel like I'm not giving my patients everything they deserve through no fault of theirs and no fault of mine. Being a mental health nurse certainly takes an emotional toll on me, as I imagine it does for many others. And I genuinely do wonder how long I'll be able to do this for, particularly if the current working conditions don't change. For me, good supervision is the key to dealing with the emotional pressure that we're put under on a daily basis. Nobody would ever say that nursing is an easy job, and it's made even more difficult by the current political and economic situation within the mental health service. And ultimately, patients will be the ones that suffer most. And this is a really hard thing to deal with, because I am someone who cares about people and cares for people, and that's why I've gone into this profession. So to feel like you can't always do that is a difficult thing to come to terms with. But I know that I will continue to do the best job that I possibly can to make sure that my patients get the best care that they can, because that's what they deserve.